Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. I am Taffany English. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am the director of the Civil Rights Memorial Center, a program of Southern Poverty Law Center. We are so grateful to gather today to share with you the details of our Impact Goals strategic planning. Before we begin, though, I'd like to go over some important information. To begin the meeting, we have muted all attendees to limit background noise as much as possible. There will be opportunities at the end of the moderated discussion to ask questions and share feedback. To do this, please click the chat button at the bottom of the screen. This will open a window where you can type your questions. We may not get to every question live. We also may modify and combine questions to get to as many questions as we can during the Q&A portion. Please feel free to pay attention to the general chat where we will be putting links to different resources mentioned today. We are hoping for no technical difficulties, keep your fingers crossed, during today's conversation. But if there are any challenges, our speakers, including myself, may temporarily go off of video to try to keep the audio uninterrupted. We are recording this briefing, which we will share with you in a follow-up email. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce to you my friend and colleague, Ann Beeson, Chief Program Officer for Southern Poverty Law Center. And Ann, will you tell us a little bit about yourself, your journey, and why you joined the SPLC?
Definitely. Thank you so much, Taffany, and thank you all for being here. We're just so excited to have you with us. I do want to share a little bit. Thank you for the invitation, Taffany, about myself and why I joined the Southern Poverty Law Center as Chief Program Officer back in May. So I'm still a bit new. I've been a civil rights lawyer and a social justice advocate and nonprofit executive for over 25 years. And I spent many years as a lawyer and the associate legal director of the ACLU National Office in New York, where I had the privilege of founding programs to stem the backlash against civil rights in the name of national security, and had the privilege of arguing cases around the country and including before the Supreme Court. And then I joined the Open Society Foundation. So I was in philanthropy for a while. That's George Soros's global philanthropy, as the head of their US programs, where I was able to change our funding strategy to expand support for state-based organizations centered in racial justice. After that, I had a calling to return to my home state of Texas and became the Chief Executive Officer of Every Texan, which is the largest progressive policy organization in the state. So as you can hear from my career path, I've actually always been interested in how we can leverage a broad range of tools to advance social justice strategically and holistically. And just on a more personal level, I'm particularly passionate about fighting racism and hate as a white woman from the South. I grew up in deeply desegregated Dallas, the daughter of school teachers, and I was part of the first class of students who were mandatorily bused across town for integration. I was working at the ACLU in New York during the 9/11 attacks and was deeply affected by the backlash, representing victims of discrimination and supporting Arab, Muslim, and South Asian communities during that era. And then when President Obama was elected, I saw the orchestrated pushback against his vision of a multiracial democracy. And later, I was horrified, but not surprised, given this history, by the rise of Trump. And like all of you, I witnessed the right deliberately use lies to manipulate and solidify white supremacy in the 2020 election. So I feel a personal obligation and a strong calling to do this work. And there is an opportunity and an urgent need now for transformative change. And what drew me specifically to SPLC in the next phase of my career journey was our legacy of fighting white supremacy and the opportunity to rethink and reimagine strategies to stem the rise of white nationalism, to undo structural racism, and to strengthen our democracy using a wide range of strategies by working in schools and communities and through research and the media, as well as in the courts and in Congress and our state legislatures. So I really can't imagine a better place than SPLC to do the work needed right now. We are rooted in the South. We are centered in racial equity. We are grounded in civil rights history, and we have the capacity and the vision to have an impact across issues and strategies. So I was so delighted to accept Margaret Huang's offer to serve as Chief Program Officer. And in this role, I have the great pleasure of overseeing our programs to fight white nationalism and hate, to advance learning for justice in schools and communities, and to support Taffany's great work in continuing the legacy of the civil rights movement through the CRMC. And Margaret also asked me to oversee the final stage of strategic planning to advance our impact goals. And that's what I'm really excited to share a little bit about with you today. And as I share our plans, I would really invite all of you to reflect on your own journey and how we can work together to meet this critical moment in our country's history. So you may be thinking, why are you bothering with strategic planning when democracy is in crisis? It's times like these in which strategy is more critical than ever. The January 6th attack on the Capitol, we all know this, was the culmination of many, of course, prior attempts, and also a specific election strategy fueled by racism, lies, and the mainstreaming of white supremacy. The global pandemic, of course, had also exacerbated long-standing inequities and disproportionately harmed and killed people of color and immigrants. And distrust in government and key institutions is at a historic high. At the same time, and I think this is very important, the current level of dysfunction and racial reckoning really provides a critical opportunity to build a multiracial democracy that lives up to the promise of justice and equality for all. And that is what we are working to do at the SPLC. It's in times like these that it's especially important to be clear about what we're trying to do and how we're going to do it. And we really have a responsibility, especially as a relatively well-resourced, important legacy civil rights organization, to use our resources, our skills, and our collective power for transformative impact. So when I joined in the spring, the organization had already done some terrific work under Margaret's leadership to identify 4 key impact goals. And those impact goals, which I'm sure many of you have seen and heard before, are to eradicate poverty, to decriminalize and decarcerate Black and Brown people, to protect voting rights and civic engagement, and to dismantle white nationalism and to protect democracy. And our staff had begun working to identify some key strategies. And in this final phase of our strategic planning process, we're doing a few different things, and I'm going to share a little bit about each. We are beginning to implement some exciting key strategies. We're assessing the landscape for work in our target states and at the federal level. We are seeking input from external partners and the communities we work alongside. And then, of course, we are taking all of that data and input and information and hard work and finalizing it into a strategic framework to guide the whole organization. And we're lucky to have a very large and talented staff. It's been like such a pleasure to get to know everyone and to engage the full staff in this process and to draw on their knowledge and skills across the organization as we continue in this process. I want to say a little bit about the landscape analyses that we're engaged in and why. We are continuing our work nationally while deepening our focus in 5 states in which we have a physical presence. In these states, unfortunately, you all know this, these deep South states are the breeding grounds for the worst of the right's racist and anti-democratic policies. If we can stop those policies here, if we can stop them from emerging in the first place, stop them in their tracks and advance our own affirmative vision for a multiracial democracy, we can actually do that nationally. So it's a national strategy rooted in the South and rooted in the states in which we have a physical presence. And it's very important to understand the context and the conditions for our work in these states. We are part, of course, of a larger social justice and movement ecosystem, and we want to make sure that we understand and seek feedback from partners as we hone our strategies. And for these reasons, we're going to be we're in the process now of identifying state research partners in each of the states to conduct external landscape analyses These will assess the current political, policy, organizing, and legal context for advancing our impact goals. They'll assess the capacity of the broader organizational ecosystem and what's missing that SPLC might be able to fill. They will identify specific opportunities and challenges over the next 5 to 10 years, and they will, of course, review and synthesize existing data and analysis. And I'm excited to share that we actually already have this process underway in Mississippi, and that'll be a valuable learning opportunity as we really develop out these analyses in our 4 other states as well. I also want to really emphasize that we are going to be including community listening sessions as part of this strategic planning process. We think it's critical to hear directly from the perspectives of communities that we work alongside and serve. And through these sort of sessions, we'll be sharing and seeking feedback on what we've learned, what strategies we're considering, and what communities would find most valuable from SPLC. What is our unique niche? And rather than wait until we have a full-fledged strategic plan to begin executing some of our big early ideas, we have identified 2 exciting campaigns that we're going to launch early next year to advance our impact goals and our vision: an anti-racism campaign and a strengthening democracy campaign. These 2 campaigns, as you can hear just in their names, address urgent external needs and opportunities while providing critical chances for SPLC internally to work collaboratively and strategically across all of our departments. So why an anti-racism campaign? Well, as you all know, the aftermath of George Floyd's murder led to this time of long overdue racial reckoning. A broader segment of American society is committed to working together to end racism, and many people and organizations need help and support on this journey, no matter where they're entering the journey. We believe that SPLC has a critical role to play in supporting people and organizations to be actively anti-racist and to work collectively to build an anti-racist society. And that's one of the core goals of this campaign. Now, as you know, as much of the country began waking up, the right intensified their backlash by pushing racist policies in elections and beyond. And they've amped up their use of race as a weapon to sow division through lies and misinformation. And, and they created a perfect boogeyman attacking the alleged teaching of critical race theory in schools. And we saw the devastating impact of those efforts last week in the Virginia governor's race and beyond. And it's really against this backdrop that SPLC is developing the anti-racism campaign. We are still in the development stages of this campaign, so please, take this as very much the ideation stage, but I am excited to share a little bit about our preliminary goals and target audiences. So as you can see on the slide, one of the primary goals is to grow the multiracial base of people who believe in, advocate for, and lead an anti-racist society. The second is to defend and advance an environment in which fewer people believe in or are susceptible to hateful racist ideologies. As you know, that's long been a part of SPLC's work. And finally, to create a shared vision and vocabulary, our own vision and vocabulary, not like a reaction to the right's crazy stories, right? In which institutions and individuals will no longer discriminate against people based on race. So we're also advancing a couple of important internal goals, and I wanted to share that with you as well as the organization continues to grow and transform. And the first is really to provide a shared framework for the broader team to understand how their individual areas of work contribute to building toward our broader vision of an anti-racist society. And the second is really to serve as an internal motivator and structure for our teams to collaborate and work across functions towards the shared goals of the campaign. We're focusing initially on 2 target audiences for a mobilization campaign. This is going to be a long-term campaign, like at least 5 years, probably more like 5 to 10. It took us a long time to get in this mess. And as you know, it's going to take a while to get back out of it. And we do expect to expand our audiences and to grow the base over time. So these are just our initial target audiences to get the campaign off the ground. The first are young adults to kind of help build and support a strong base of young leaders in communities who are directly harmed by racism, really led and centered around young people of color and also their young white allies. The second are key influencers, And so we're really excited about engaging business leaders, faith leaders, and educators by providing them with meaningful actions that they can take to help build an anti-racist society. And we really hope and believe that by directing and targeting our messaging and our engagement opportunities at these two very different audiences, the campaign can begin to socialize anti-racism ideology and the associated vocabulary through a broad swath of the population. And just this week, I'm excited to share, we actually began some deep research, polling and messaging research that we're going to be doing to establish the messaging and the engagement strategies for the campaign. And we expect very quickly to learn back from that research about current attitudes towards anti-racism and what people need to become more engaged in this work. So one of the shorter opportunities for the campaign early next year will be to partner directly with membership organizations across the country to offer training and materials on how to defend the teaching of hard history, which we have long done, training teachers through our Learning for Justice program, and to defend inclusive education. And we're excited to also help groups learn more about how to engage directly in advocacy at places like school boards and in our state legislatures, and of course federally as well over the summer and fall. And this really helps to build on and connect our existing programs. So I just wanted to kind of illustrate how those existing programs will become connected and leveraged through this broader campaign. Again, as I've shared, Learning for Justice is already actively engaged, has an incredible history and experience helping students and families and communities grapple with hard history and understand how racism shapes our everyday lives. And they're building out that curriculum for use beyond schools and in communities and other spaces. Our intelligence project, of course, will continue its great work to track hate and expose white nationalists. And they're also doing some exciting new work on the front end of it to prevent radicalization and to support communities that could be harmed. And we really believe that all of those connections and that work that they are doing can be leveraged as part of this broader campaign. Of course, the Civil Rights Memorial and Museum has such a strong history and really can tie our present work and civil rights movements to the past movements and really be a physical space for engaging people in the campaign, especially in Alabama. Our legal department, you all know, is constantly engaged in impact litigation to dismantle institutional racism in multiple spaces, schools, elections, the criminal justice system, the immigration system. And we think it's really critical for this campaign to help people make the leap for some. I'm sure that's not all of you on the call because you've been engaged in supporting this work for so long, but you all know that it's still too much of a challenge, really. People tend to think of racism as like an issue around individual behavior and discrimination and hate, and not to understand that the groundwater are racist institutions that need to be dismantled in some ways and rebuilt to promote equity and fairness. And we really, as part of the campaign, hope to come up with the right language that helps people understand those connections. And then, of course, finally, our policy department will continue to advocate and advance federal and state policies to address systemic racism in these same systems. So our second campaign is our Strengthening Democracy campaign, and it really aims to address the current crisis of democracy, which, of course, as you all know and are experiencing, threatens to further erode voting rights and other core elements of a functioning multiracial democracy. The goal of this campaign is really to build a truly representative democracy that serves the historically disenfranchised and is inclusive, accountable, and inspiring. This campaign will also include litigation, policy, and organizing strategies. It'll include powerful research, messaging, and public education strategies to help rebuild, and expand support for democracy and the core tenets and elements and structures of democracy, while exposing the anti-democratic actions and strategies of elected officials and others on the right. This campaign also, like the Anti-Racism Campaign, will complement and connect our current work, building on the great work of our voting rights project in the legal department, as well as our policy team. They have been very hard at work fighting voter suppression and advancing great pieces of legislation like the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and other legislation to expand the franchise and protect the right to vote. We're also very excited to continue to support and partner with grassroots groups through our Vote Your Voice project. That is the project in which we provided grants to groups working on the ground in our target states around voter registration, turnout, and longer-term engagement on issues. And of course, the campaign will also build on the great work of the Intelligence Project, specifically around electoral extremism and really exposing the connections between certain candidates and deeply problematic hate and extremist groups, and also the work of our Learning for Justice team to expand civics education in schools and communities.